hear that being announced. And I've got the pleasure of introducing Rich Uhrlaub. Rich serves as the president of the Coalition for Truth and Transparency in Adoption and the Denver-based Adoption Search Resource Connection. He's part of an advocacy team that has seen over 15 Colorado bills signed into law since 2014 to the benefit of adult adoptees, foster youth, birth parents, and donor-conceived people. A frequent presenter at conferences, Rich's interviews and writings have been published in various news outlets and peer-reviewed books. His new musical about adoption, Identity and Truth is called For the Records, and I'll put the link in chat as we get started. Welcome, Rich, and we're thrilled to have you.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. It's great to see you also.
Nice to see you.
So just for those of you who may not know me, I'll give a little bit of background. I was conceived in the upper Midwest and born and raised here in Denver, Colorado. My mother moved here, and my father, by all reports, helped support her through the pregnancy. She was 25 and he was 35. And so I was relinquished and adopted in Denver, grew up here. Pretty much always knew I was adopted and struggled with it. It was a classic baby scoop era type thing with lots of secrecy and things we didn't really talk about. Our parents loved us to death and did everything they knew to do to give us a great home. And so I was very fortunate and blessed in that way. And both my adoptive parents have passed, and a search that took a number of years resulted in me finding some aunts and cousins and half siblings, but both my birth parents had passed. I found out before I was even out of high school. And so that's part of what has driven my passion around this whole movement, is the thought that no one should have to look for their family for 15 years to find dead people. And it's the gift that keeps on giving. Is that the right way to say it? In the sense that these are milestones in your life, and that energy has to go somewhere, right? It can be constructive, it can be destructive. I've had a deep experience with both constructive and destructive ways of dealing with my adoption and relinquishment issues. So when I was a kid, my mom started us playing the piano when we were young. I was like 5 years old, and one night she said, "Hey, who wants to learn to play the piano?" And we were doing the dishes, and I remembered, I don't know why I remembered that moment, because most of my childhood is just a blur. But I was like, yeah, let's do it. And I thought we were going to learn to play the piano in one night. That obviously didn't happen. But I took lessons for quite a while, and it was a bit of a struggle. I really loved it. But there's the call of, playing football with the kids down the block and that kind of stuff as well. And finally, at the end of, probably the end of junior high, I stopped taking lessons at that time. But it's always been a passion. I still own a piano and I tinker around on it. So fast forward to the pandemic, when everyone is locked at home needing creative outlets. And one day I was sitting outside in the hot tub where I live and just got this download of song titles into my head. And I thought, that would make a really great musical. And I was convinced 100% that I was not the right person to do that. I don't have an MFA. I haven't been performing. I haven't been composing and that sort of thing. But through the miracle of online courses and the miracle of digital production software, I was able to come up with some songs. And I've been taking writing and poetry classes, which teach you a lot about lyrics and rhyme and meter and that sort of thing. And those things all came together. And with the song titles, I already knew what the story was because I'd been living it for decades. And out of that came a rough draft. And I found some talented people to take my little songs and turn them into really great arrangements. And just kept putting one foot in front of the other, not knowing what was going to come. And here we are with a 2-act musical that's had 2 table readings. This Friday evening at the Untangling Our Roots Summit here in Denver, it's going to be the first full staged reading. And if you're coming, all I can say is you're in for a treat. The cast is amazing. They're so passionate about it. About half the cast is adoptees or has some direct connection to adoption. And it's a very poignant story, bittersweet, of course, but there's some real self-discovery and empowerment and hope and resolution in it as well. The main character is named Joshua Greenman, and he is of Mexican and Italian ancestry, but gets adopted into a Jewish family. And all kinds of secrets and confusion and surprises and revelations ensue. And those of us who've lived this understand exactly what that means, that there's conflicts and struggles and internal questions and external opposition. And he finally is able to find a good therapist and a good support group, and they band together to start making changes and to grow and deal with all the issues that they face. So that's kind of a summary of the story. On your way in, you might have heard a few of the songs. We've got like 30-second clips of them. And Julius, if you want to try to maybe start at song number 4, we'll play maybe 3 more of them. Some different styles that I'll talk about as well.
I liked making planes out of balsa, but I loved eating latkes with salsa. At first all the kids called me crazy, but when they tried it, it tasted amazing. Wood burning and yearning for the day that I would be returning. Heard stories, some were gory, of Israelites who gave God glory. Shot arrows, wheelbarrows, raced along a path that was narrow. First kiss, it was was a time that altered both our fates. A secret buried now is brought to light. I hope I am not calling you too late. I pray I am not calling you too late. Would you consider setting up a date?
Through the struggle and confusion, there's one thing I've come to know. No more fantasy and illusion, 'cause there ain't no quid pro quo. Despite all your good intentions to save children from neglect, these family interventions create loss and disconnect.
I made my daughter trade her baby for a future of better.
Thanks, Julius. Nice job. So as you can see, there are different flavors of music. It's set starting in the late 1960s, and there's a period of Joshua's early life up through about age 12 or 13, where he's at home living the life of a normal kid, but then goes away to camp. And some rumors start flying at camp, and that forces some truth out into the open that his parents have been hiding. And then we fast forward into his adult life as he's dealing with some of these issues that he's been suppressing all this time. And so there's pop rock, there's a little disco, a little hip hop in there from that 60s and 70s period, early hip hop and rap. And then there's some klezmer salsa mashup because of his culture, and there's some gospel. There's a big gospel number at the end of Act 1 about standing up for your rights and fighting for yourself, and just a little bit of something for everybody. And of course, a couple of really meaningful, poignant ballads and power ballads as well. So that's kind of a summary of what's going on, and there seems to be a lot of buzz about it. At the table readings, my first table reading was all with friendly people who loved it and got it. A second table reading, I entered a pitch contest through an organization in Dallas and wound up in the top 2 of that pitch contest. And as a result, the prize was they did a table reading and filmed it, which was so beneficial for me. But the people involved with that reading, most of them had no real connection to adoption. And that was incredibly helpful because I want this to appeal not just to our bubble, our little community, but also to the public at large, to educate and inform and move them. And hopefully some of that public is going to include some legislators who may get it on a more visceral level than just hearing testimony. So that's a little bit of the history as far as what's happening. Oh, and the first 3 acts were performed at the Colorado New Musical Festival last summer. So the momentum just continues to build, and I'm frankly a little blown away. I'm in a pitch week right now, organized by a group in Los Angeles, where there are about 40 shows being pitched to about 35 or 40 producers and directors. And if you've ever done any advocacy, if you think it's scary getting up in front of a legislative committee, wait till you get in front of a producer who's just listening, not saying anything, saying polite things or maybe interested things. It's quite an experience. So I'm open to any questions or thoughts or things you might want to ask Betsy as well.
So you kind of touched on it, but one of the things I love about this project is I think change happens in so many different ways, and all too often we're talking in our own echo chamber, the people who already get it or at least on their way to getting it. And it's much harder to reach the general public. So a project like this just creates all kinds of opportunities to reach different audiences and people that might not otherwise be exposed. So I just think that's really great.
There's something about the power of music, and you may or may not be a musical theater fan. I grew up in the era where everybody went to see Oklahoma and The Sound of Music and Cabaret and all those different shows, and my family was no different. And you can say some things in a song that can land in a deeper way. I absolutely believe this than you can just say in a sentence. And when you take it out of the context of one of the things that we spent years in Colorado when we would go testify on bills for records access, our goal was to hope they would get it emotionally. And some people can and some people can't. But when you neutralize it and put someone up on the stage and you're watching what they're going through and they're singing about it, and there are those feelings, this wasn't really my goal, but the goal was really to bring out the depth of the emotion. And in doing that, to touch people and move people, to have compassion and to also see the problems with the system that still exist. And pretty much across the board, there's 3 or 4 songs that almost everybody, adopted or not, connected to adoption or not, it brings some tears up and it brings some strong emotions. And that means a lot to me, because that means they're having empathy for what's happening, rather than just saying, well, didn't you have great adoptive parents? And those of us who are in this world will say, well, yes, and that's kind of a separate issue.
So Rich, you used the term table reading, and I'm not familiar with that. I don't know if some of the audience might be, but can you talk a little bit more about the process of developing it and stepping out into the more public eye?
Yes, and this is something I'm learning as I go. I am a complete neophyte and have met some really kind people who've taught me a lot of things. But in developing, the old the old Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney shows where they'd be, hey, let's have a show. And all of a sudden you come up with an idea and boom, you're on Broadway. That is not how it works. You come up with an idea, you find some collaborators ideally, or as in my case, I was fortunate that it all just sort of came together with some help. But early steps are, one of the first things you do is called a table reading, which can be as simple as call up 6 or 8 or 10 of your friends who want to read your script, order some pizza, and then you go around the room and read it just to see how it lands out loud. Because when you're writing it in your mind, you can have people with a certain tone of voice and characters with a certain foible about them, but it may not make it off of the page as people are reading it. So you just want to see how it lands the first time around. You make changes from that and maybe do another table reading. And with the refinements, the changes you've made, see how that goes. And you might have a few songs done at a club and a concert. I was really thrilled and honored when Beth Syverson, who's an adoptive mom, lives in Southern California. She's going to play piano for us this Friday, and very talented musician. And she said, hey, I'm doing a service at my Unitarian church about adoption. Can we play a couple of your songs there? Can we perform them? And any opportunity like that, just to get it out there and get the performance is so exciting. And so they chose 2 songs, Real Mother, which you heard a clip of on the way in, which is the birth first mother, Blanca, who is coerced to relinquish her baby, and the adoptive mother, Eliana, singing on separate parts of the stage, but asking the same question, am I a real mother because there's another who gives him what I could not? Other song that they sang was called the I Want song. And there was a father-son combo in their church that the kid was like 15 and dad was maybe in his 40s. And it's a duet between young Joshua and older Joshua kind of looking back on himself, called Dying to Know. And they just crushed it. And you can see the link on the website, but the crowd really was enthusiastic and cheering. And the guy who was the MC walked up to the front and he was kind of choked up and he was like, hell, you could have warned me. And he didn't seem to have any real connection to adoption, but the fact that it touched people without that connection told me that we were going in the right direction.
Were you there? Did you get to be there and watch?
Say that again?
Were you present at that event?
I was there on Zoom, yeah.
Oh, at Zoom, okay. Yeah.
Choked up.
It must feel wonderful to see your work come to life like that.
It is amazing when my arranger sent me the first song on sheet music that had the title and the show and my name on it. My head just exploded. It's incredible to see something come to fruition and to feel like it's being driven by something or someone much bigger than you.
Mm-hmm. So we actually don't have any questions in chat yet. We've got a manageable size group this evening. If anybody wants to even come off mute and pose a question, what's on people's minds? What would you like to know from Rich?
Well, I'll go. Hi, Rich. I'm Catalina from Hawaii. Hi. I was wondering, are you going to be doing a full-scale theatrical thing? Will your efforts be filmed so people can see it that aren't in your area?
Yeah, we will be videoing the reading and ideally using some of those clips to help generate support to do a fully staged theatrical production. One of the actors in the show is pretty connected here in Denver. And she said, you know, I've read your script and I know 4 theaters and I think we'd probably love to do this. And I said, cool, let's reach out to them. So yeah, step by step. But what's happening at the conference will be filmed, and we'll be making a recording of it as well. Obviously, in a hotel ballroom is not the ideal setting, but on the other hand, little black box stages aren't necessarily the ideal setting either to get a super quality recording, but it gives people the flavor of it. So one of the things I've learned in these workshops I've attended is the initials OPM, and that stands for other people's money. Because it is not an inexpensive endeavor to get things even to this point. And so that's why I'm doing these pitches. And on the website, there's a link where if people are interested, they can contribute. It's kind of a buy me a coffee thing. And we definitely want to pay the actors who are involved this weekend. And it all costs money. But I'm continuing on with or without money. So it's cool.
So will you be putting the recording on YouTube or on your website or something? Some way we could see whatever happens this weekend?
Yeah, absolutely. I will post it on, I'm going to work with our video people, our videographers, and we've got somebody, I want to create a sizzle reel out of it, something shorter. And then we'll also be posting at least part of it, at least some teasers from it.
On your website or YouTube?
It'll be on the website, and the website may be a link to YouTube, because you can only upload files of a certain size.
And you'll give us your web address?
Yes, happy to do that. It's posted in the chat, but it is ftrmusical.com. So think for the records musical.com, ftrmusical.com.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, so now we have a couple questions in chat. One person wants to know if you're bringing it live to the eastern part of the country. Do you have any plans?
I don't have specific plans, but I already have an actor from New York who's interested. I was advertising online and for actors, and he thought this was going to be a staged reading in New York City, and he's Broadway, or at least off-Broadway quality guy, and he applied because he's got a Jewish background, and he's like, any chance I get to speak a little Hebrew, I want to do it. And he's like, well, when it comes to New York, tell me, and I want to audition. So if you know of a venue that might be interested, please let me know, and we'll do everything we can, because pushing it out to Los Angeles and New York, those are big steps in development of a show.
And we've got another question from one person in liberal arts to another. I wish you and all the performers all the success. He and his co-editors edited play will be released tomorrow. So synchronicity in the theater world.
Wonderful. It's taken us a while to get our momentum up, but in our community, there's so much creativity being generated now. There's a couple of individuals who have written part of a musical. They're not done yet, but they've written part of a musical about a DNA search. And there's another one that has been staged in New York. So there's a couple, I know of 3 DNA surprise musicals that are in the works. To my knowledge, and my arranger and my sound engineer / orchestrator, who, by the way, I met him in town because he's a musician playing in the Broadway production of Anastasia. And they both said, nobody's done this and nobody's doing anything like your show, Rich, and it needs to get out there. So who knows what can happen.
So Rich, how long have you been working on this? I know you told me about it. It feels like maybe a couple of years ago, or when did you?
Yeah, the idea started probably 3 to 4 years ago, and then all of a sudden, I took a course online about how to write a musical, And one of the projects was writing what's called the I Want song. And that finished up almost exactly 2 years ago. And then a year ago, I was working with my arranger to convert the songs I had written into something. He's a musical director that does shows all over the East Coast and Midwest, but converting my little songs into something that was show worthy with some real showstoppers in it. And he had the chops to do that. They say that a songwriter's best friend is a good arranger, and it's absolutely true. So 4 years. The other answer to this, I've been working on it all my life.
Yeah, there's that, right? What other questions do people have? Feel free to come off mute and pose your questions if you'd like.
One thought I would add for anybody, I have people I work with and other people I know, they say, I just don't have a creative bone in my body. I don't know how you would do this. And open yourself up to the possibility that you do have some creative bones in your body. If you like music, and it can be anything, it could be writing. You could take a poetry class. You could take a nonfiction class. You could take a basic piano instruction class. You can take a songwriting class. And there may be things in you that you don't know are there. And it's not only inspiring, but it's incredibly therapeutic. I cried all the way through this process because I've been around long enough and facilitated support groups and been down at the Capitol for years and heard stories and been to conferences. And one of the things I told these producers today is this is not just one guy's story. This is a compilation of stories built into characters in this show, really representing 50 years of history in America that's still going on. These issues are still current. We're still fighting the battle legislatively. We're still having secrecy and deception in adoption in certain places, although it has gotten better. We're still seeing the grief and the loss of mothers who were coerced. We're still seeing adoptive parents who deeply love their children but don't have the tools they need, or maybe you're coming in with some assumptions that are not healthy. And so this is a way to do a little self-therapy, because it touches places you don't know you're going to go. That's the crazy thing. It takes you places you don't know you're going to go.
Yeah, I can imagine that it touches you at a different level, and the viewer as well. So we'll all get to experience that this weekend at the conference. I'm looking forward to it. We have one comment in the chat that the big screen is calling. Any thoughts of maybe making this a movie instead of or in addition, I should say, to theater?
This is interesting. I was at an event last summer in Los Angeles. Kind of serendipitously, another class I took, our capstone project was to create a 15-minute musical. And that's going to be played at the conference this weekend as well. And that musical is called For the Good of Humanity. And it's about, they're calling it the Frozen Embryo musical, but it's really about fertility fraud. And so I was out in Los Angeles seeing that performed in a small theater at West Hollywood with my classmates. That coincided with another conference happening around musical theater. So I just hung out for another week and went to that and met some really interesting people, some very big name people in the industry. And one of them is the music director at Disney. And I told him my story and his eyes got really big. And he said, "What stage are you at? Send me your stuff." And it was really too early to send it to him, but he hasn't said no yet. And so, who knows what might come from that.
Mhm. Sounds like you've got lots of different irons in the fire. That's really great.
I am just networking my little heart out, telling everybody I can about the story, and you really find a lot of helpful people who are in the same boat you are. One of the misconceptions, and I've heard this from a couple of producers who said, if you're waiting for whoever, he's passed away, but if you're waiting for Stephen Sondheim to show up and pull you from the crowd and say, this is brilliant and we've got to get you to Broadway, the odds of that happening are incredibly low. But if you're rising with other boats at the same level, and there's some incredibly talented people, some incredibly creative people who all want to help each other and collaborate and offer tips, and hey, here's this thing you can go to, or here's a podcast you can go to, or here's somebody I want you to meet or connect you with. There really is a great spirit of helpfulness out there. There's a few unhealthy people who just want to step on you on the way to the top as well, but it's not as cutthroat as you would imagine. And I say that as somebody who nobody wants a piece of right now, because the show's not making millions of dollars. But all the little people are trying to help each other, which is kind of cool.
I would think there's also a sense of competition because you're all looking for that OPM, right? And there's a limited
That
pot
is
of.
true. That is true. There's a finite number of dollars out there. And one of the tips that one producer said in a session today was, if you have a show that you think you can launch in London, right now there's more money flowing in London because the government helps fund a lot of their theater. Whereas here it's all private money and everybody's downsizing and costs are going up, and the big casts are a bigger risk, of course. And so you kind of have to right size it. But I've talked to other people who've said, there are people with tons of money who would love a big splashy cast. You look at what's happening on Broadway right now. Water for Elephants is not a small show. And if they see the potential and they get passionate about it, they're willing to invest.
How big is your cast?
Well, great question. I started with 25 and everybody said that is way too many people. And so it's chopped down to about 16 right now. And at the table reading in Dallas, they covered all the characters with about a cast of 10, because you can double characters, or you can have ensemble members play several smaller parts. So we're right at around 16, which seems a little more manageable. We've got 14 actors that you'll see on Friday night.
So you mentioned London. This would be a very American show in London, since this isn't a problem in England, since they opened their records decades ago.
Well, it's interesting because people ask me about comps for the show, and you kind of have to be careful based on your audience. One of the comps that I use is Blood Brothers, which, if you're not familiar with it, it was one of the longest running shows in the West End, and it's about a mother who had twins and had to relinquish one of them. She was a housekeeper and she relinquished one of them to the woman she worked for. And really compelling. When it toured the US, Petula Clark played the main character, and David and Sean Cassidy played the brothers.
Interesting.
So Britain responds to this kind of pathos, I guess is the right word.
Yeah.
Pathos. I'm seeing some interesting comments pop up. Let's look at a couple of those. Someone's talking about 34 years of doing something.
So actually, and Lori, I see you have your hand up, but Stephen, did you have your hand up? It looked a little different than the normal. No, okay. So we'll move to Lori, who had her hand up.
My name is Lori, and I happen to be in Denver, and I happen to have more access to Rich than I'm blessed to do that. Thanks to Linda, who's on this call, Linda Mueller, who introduced us many, many years ago. So I guess, Rich, I don't really have a question. I just want to tell you that as another creator who is trying to get the plight of adoption, the complexity of adoption out into the world beyond adoption world and the people who are directly affected, I am just so excited for your effort. I've been to some of the semi-productions that you've gotten to have. I've been at one of the table
One of our first readers.
one of
Thank
the
you.
readers, and just it's so good. I just want everybody on here who's not in Denver to know that this is so good. It's brilliant, it's creative, it's catchy, it's all the things that a great Broadway or West End show should be. And that's how change and understanding happens. And so I had to get on here tonight because I'm just so excited. I count me as one of your cheerleaders.
Thank you so much. And I'm a fan of yours and your podcast and all the good work you do. There are different views out there in the world of how change happens. And one of the popular views is you can't really be a change agent unless you're speaking from lived experience. And my view, and I appreciate that, I absolutely believe we all need to tell our stories. My view of that is that we need all the help and allies we can get. And when we can band together as people with a shared experience from different angles, that's even more powerful than just a single angle. That adoptees and donor conceived people and NPE people and adoptive parents and first and birth parents together and therapists all together, when we raise a united voice and create a united front, that's what a real coalition looks like. And that gets people to sit up and take notice that it's not just one group whining about something. And I've shared this. I'm going to put on my legislative hat for a minute because they're sort of inseparable. But I've shared this before, that one of our challenges is that when legislators see us, or even some of our friends or family or the news media sees us, and we show up with our master's degrees and our nice suits and our driving our nice cars, and we're clearly well educated, it's hard sometimes for them to say, and you're oppressed, why? You seem like you're doing okay. We all got problems. And this is a way, I think, to help people start to get it. In the legislative workshop that we're going to be doing this weekend as well, we took a little poll of some of the participants and said, what interests you? What are you wanting to work on? And one person who had signed up said, well, I want to come because this seems like the closest place that I can learn how to explain to the world that adoptees are a marginalized group. And I totally get that, because every day something happens where we feel marginalized, or the whole microaggression thing. But I pushed back a little bit and I said, that's interesting you bring that up, because one of the things we're going to cover in our workshop is a list of words that you should not say, trigger words that are not useful in adoption reform and bipartisan societal support and thinking. And marginalized is one of them, because if you're a Democrat, that might appeal to you. If you're a Republican, that's a red flag that says, whoops, they're one of those people. And it can kill your support. And so that's one of the things we're going to talk about, and talking about strategies for societal change. And that's really the goal of this. Lori and the people who've uttered the word Broadway, your lips to God's ears, right? if that ever happens and there's substantial money made, I absolutely want to contribute a big chunk of it to educating the public and toward the causes that we care about. Here in Colorado, we've done not only original birth certificates, but birth parent access to records they signed, sibling access to information about siblings when they came through the state home for dependent children, foster youth issues, helping them get driver's licenses and insurance and things like that. So when they age out, they can have a pathway to an income rather than just ending up on the streets, like many do who don't have the resources. So we're looking at a much bigger picture. We're really excited that hopefully one of our speakers at the conference is going to be Steve Fenberg, who is the president of the Colorado Senate right now. And we collaborated with a team of donor conceived folks to help get the first bill passed that starting in 2025, if you donate, air quotes, egg or sperm, you do so with the understanding that those children that are created with that will know your identity when they turn 18. And it wasn't a perfect bill, but it was the first bill. It broke the ice, and it has created quite a stir in that industry.
We're working on the same thing in Ohio right now. So hope to follow in your footsteps.
And it can happen. It will happen as people see that and they hear what's happening in different places.
Who else has questions? Any other questions from folks? You can either put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I'll call on you, or you can just come off mute and speak.
And I'm open to other creatives. I see a lot of creative energy here. If you've got something you want to share you're working on, or something you've learned in the process that might inspire other people, by all means, chime in. I have an interesting story that I'll share while you're pondering any further questions or comments, but the cast for this show is pretty diverse. We've got 2 teenagers. We've got several people in their early to mid 20s, a couple in their mid to late 20s, a couple in their early to mid 30s, and some on up into their 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I love that about the show. Ethnically diverse as well. And we really want that to capture the broad spectrum. Adoption is so complicated. There's no way you can capture everybody and all the stories. But we have an international adoptee, we have a transracial adoptee role, young birth parents, older birth parents, aging adoptees with health issues in the show, just to show that this is really a universal issue, that's continuing. It's not just about the baby scoop era. The baby scoop era planted the seeds, and we're really fighting the dust of that time. I saw a question pop up in the chat, but I couldn't read the whole thing.
Here, I'll get it. Did you find that you had to become an ad hoc detective in your own search? And if so, how much of that experience did you inject into your script? Great question.
Ask the first part again. I heard the word detective, but I missed the first part.
Did you find that you had to become an ad hoc detective in your own search? And if so, how much of that experience did you inject into your script?
Yes, I think everybody has to become an ad hoc detective, especially, I started searching in the mid to late 1990s. There was no internet. There was no DNA. A lot of the tools that were there, we had, there were search angels and people who had access to some databases and resources. But it was a very much putting all the puzzle pieces together. I found the group Adoptees in Search, which is now ASRC, Adoption Search Resource Connection here in Colorado. And tremendous help. There are people who knew what they were doing. I went in with my non-identifying information. Finally, at one point along the way, my parents had given me some records that helped me. And so pieces of my story are definitely injected into this story. It's not an autobiography. Obviously, I am not mixed race, Mexican and Italian, and I was not adopted into a Jewish family. But there were elements of my story that show up, as well as elements of other people who I've known and stories I've heard at conferences and seen online. Because there are certain commonalities we all share, certain dynamics that we all deal with. And that's what I really want to get across. You have to be, when you're dealing with a public that may be coming from zero knowledge about any of this, you have to parse it out in little M&Ms. And that's so hard for us to do. Friends that I've grown up with, we'll get together for dinner and they say, Rich, what's going on with you? And I get 5 minutes to talk about adoption and I have to talk about something else. Because they know what they're in for if I get going. And we all love each other, but they have to set boundaries with me, which I appreciate.
I'm sure they've had lots of doses.
Well, and one woman who I think is going to be there for the show Friday, she told me she's coming. She said, we got together about a year ago and she said, you know, Rich, I did a DNA test and now I know what you're talking about, where she had a surprise. And yeah, turns out her dad had 2 families going in 2 different cities because he was a traveling salesman. And she says, I get it on a level that I never thought I would have, but now I get it.
I just ran across a research study actually about DNA surprises by the Pew Research Center. And it said that 1 in 7 people has done DNA testing in our country, and 27% of them have found, you know, an unknown, previously unknown relative. So it's
Kara Rubenstein-Dyron, who is one of the planners of the conference, is tracking this. And you know, we talk about maybe 6 or 7 million adoptees, or maybe 10 million donor conceived people, or 20 million donor conceived people. And she's saying this NPE thing is going to exceed both of those, and probably both of them put together, in terms of the surprises it creates and the bombshells that land different places.
Oh,
NPE,
somebody wants a definition. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
We're turning around and nomenclature here.
So this is one of the self-labels that this population gives. They call it a non-parental event, where you do a DNA test and find out that, or a misattributed parentage event, where you do a DNA test, and often it turns out that the person you thought was your father is not your father.
I've also heard NP also be used for not parent expected, you know, is another thing it can stand for, but
and it's interesting to see how all these communities are forming, that the adoption reform community has been going a good, 40, 50 years. And we look at amazing progress, but in some ways still the same struggles and the same objections. And in many ways, the donor conceived community, in terms of their self-advocacy, and the NPE community are really just gelling and getting an identity and going through the struggles and the infighting and the we're the only true ones and all the things that defeat us as we go along. And so it's interesting to see that same evolution taking place.
Fran asked about what's going on in Ohio about adoption. Adoption Network has our lobby day in a couple weeks down at the State House. We're going to be talking to the legislature about a number of different issues. One is identification and donor conceived situations going forward. Another is about siblings. So another thing that Rich has accomplished, at least partially in Colorado. Another is complicated, but Ohio's law around access to records has been in chunks of time, and we got the law changed about 10 years ago to open up 400,000 records between the closed period of 64 and 96. From 96 forward, for the most part, they are open, but the law isn't really what it should be. So we're looking to fine tune that and hopefully fix that time period as well. And then we're also going to be talking to legislators about advertising and adoption. Ohio had pretty restrictive laws until about 10 years ago, and when that changed, it opened up the floodgates to some abuse. So we'd like to see that be a little more restrictive than it is right now.
You can
I
tell
am
Betsy's been at this a while just by her. How could you say no to this woman? You know, she's so pleasant and so rational.
Change is slow. Lots of people say no, right? We all know that.
Yeah, the no does not always come from a rational place. That's the problem, right?
Yeah, if you stay at it long enough, then they have to say yes eventually, but it may take a while. I'm going to put a link in the chat for a survey if when we're all done, if you don't mind clicking through. It's just a really brief survey to let us know your thoughts about the program this evening. You can also let us know if you've got any suggestions for future programs. This series goes through next month, and then we take a break for the summer. People have better things to do, I think, on nice warm summer evenings than sitting in front of a computer. So after the end of May, then we'll be back in September. Next week, we actually have, or not next week, in 2 weeks, May 6th, we've got From the Outside In, a journalist perspective with Amy Marcus, who's with the Wall Street Journal. She's been writing a lot about the politics of donor conceived and adoption situations, and is a really great journalist. And so she agreed to come on and let us know what it looks like from her perspective. So looking forward to that one. We have time maybe for one more question, and then we're going to wrap up. Any lingering thoughts?
My lingering thought is I just so appreciate everyone being here and the interest and the energy around this. And I love that as our communities mature, we're approaching this as a multi-pronged approach to societal change and getting into people's hearts and minds. And I think it's going to be so powerful that some great things have happened and the momentum is only building. And I just encourage you, if you've got a vision or something you've thought about writing or doing or singing or chanting or jumping around about, do it.
I love that. Thank you, Rich. Okay, well, thank you for joining us this evening, everybody, and thank you especially to Rich. I know this is a tremendously, I couldn't believe that you said yes when I pitched this date being open, because not only with the conference coming up, I didn't even know you had your pitch week happening. So you've got a crazy, crazy schedule. So we really appreciate you taking this time with us.
When I signed up for this workshop, I did not understand how intense and multi-day it was going to be. I thought, oh, that sounds cool. And then they started describing it, and I thought, well, I have to do it, but I may have an aneurysm in the process. So
I'm glad
thanks
that
so
you're
much
doing
for having me. It's been great.
Your play needs to get out there, so that's really great. So I'll close by reminding everybody that Adoption Network Cleveland is a nonprofit organization. We serve individuals touched by adoption, kinship care, and foster care. We are membership based, and so if you're not yet a member or interested in joining, you can check out our website, which is adoptionnetwork.org. So thanks everybody for coming. And Rich, I will make sure I'll copy the chat so that you've got all the comments.